Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! No more needs of life.
I have no money to give you.
Please! Anything!
I'd like a stump up your ass.
Stay out of here!
You got a lot of soap. Hey, baby, what's happening? How you doing? You want you to have a man with no legs, you didn't...
I can see! I can see!
I have no... Oh, I'm sorry about that, man.
In Philadelphia, a well-educated young man named Louis Winthorpe III works as a managing director at a commodities brokerage firm called Duke & Duke. Having had a privileged upbringing and having attended the best schools, Louis excels at his job, where he's respected by his peers and lives in a luxurious townhouse provided by the firm with his butler Coleman. One morning, with a tray of breakfast and the morning's newspaper in hand, Coleman calmly wakes Louis up so that he can get ready for work. After breakfast, while Louis reads his paper, Coleman shaves him, picks out a suit from his closet, and presents it to him. As he gets dressed, Louis informs his butler that his fiancée Penelope will join them for dinner and asks him to make the necessary arrangements. After getting dressed, Louis steps out of the house and waits by his car parked outside until Coleman arrives to open the door for him. Then, Coleman drives Louis to work. There, Louis is greeted respectfully by all the staff before heading to his office, where he prepares to start the busy day ahead. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, owners of the brokerage firm, brothers Randolph and Mortimer Duke, wake up in their luxurious mansion, get ready for work, and go downstairs to be greeted by their respective butlers. As they head out to work, they are greeted by all their staff, who respectfully form a line outside the door to wish them a good day. The brothers then wait until their driver opens the door for them and get inside. During their drive, Randolph and Louis discuss work and make some decisions.
As high as it's going to go.
It'll never get that high. Let's sell now.
Just another few seconds.
The market's closing. We won't get the order in.
We just made an extra 347.
Delighted to have made such a profit before the day even starts, the brothers head to a prestigious private club called the Heritage, planning to spend their day catching up on current events and relaxing. Once there, when the brothers step out of their car, they are heckled by a con artist named Billy Ray Valentine, who pretends to be a disabled war veteran and begs for money, and Mortimer and the doorman are forced to push him away and warn him never to return. Once inside, Mortimer spends a few minutes reading a newspaper and passionately shares the report from the Department of Agriculture, which states that the prices of frozen concentrated orange juice will stagnate for a few months. However, still absorbed in the science journal, and continues arguing that scientists don't understand human nature very well. Annoyed by this, Mortimer proceeds to scold his older brother for his obsessiveness until their drinks are served.
I bet you thought I'd forgotten your Christmas bonus.
No,
Half of it.
$5. Maybe.
How clueless can you two be? Later, Louis arrives at the Heritage Club to meet the Dukes and first runs into a group of colleagues. Knowing that one of the men, Todd, has interests in Penelope and suddenly annoyed upon seeing him, Louis greets the group politely, turns down their offer to join him, and heads to meet with his bosses. Then, Louis presents Randolph and Mortimer with some payrolls to sign, which they start to do, complaining about the amount of money they pay their staff. Moments later, Randolph comes across a $50,000 check for one Clarence Beeks, and questions Louis about his identity and why he's getting a hefty salary. Louis, who's also confused by this, swears that he doesn't know an employee by that name until Mortimer quiets them both, signals his brother to agree with everything he says, and announces that Clarence is doing some top-secret research for the firm and hence deserves his salary. Then, Mortimer, who seemingly wants to change the topic of discussion at all costs, asks Louis about his fiancée and their grandniece, Penelope. That was shady. Once Louis leaves, Mortimer sings his praises to Randolph, admiring the young man's noble nature. However, an amusing argument soon ensues, as Randolph explains that Louis's excellence has nothing to do with his nature, and instead argues that his comfortable and privileged environment that had provided him with endless opportunities throughout his life had given him the tools and shaped him to be the man known for his character and integrity, and asserts that if anyone else had been given the same opportunity, they too would turn out like him, or better. Meanwhile, outside the club, Billy continues creating a scene and heckling people until the police show up.
Police, we've had some complaints about con men.
Rough, very painful.
You were in now?
What unit were you in?
I was with the Green Beret. I have legs! I have, oh shit, look at this! Man, I can happening? Really, I appreciate it. Y'all's okay now. I'm all right.
Embarrassed, Billy somehow manages to talk his way out of his predicament and walks away from the officers, who give him a final warning. Then, Billy walks away from the officers as fast as he can and accidentally bumps into Louis, who's walking out of the Heritage Club.
Bag.
Take it. Please don't kill me. I'm getting married.
Hey, I don't want your bag, man.
Talk about an overreaction. With a group of cops chasing him, Billy runs around the club while trying to explain that it was all a big misunderstanding, that he wasn't stealing anything and was just trying to hand the briefcase back to Louis to no avail. A few minutes of chaos later, Billy is caught and handcuffed, with Louis somehow hailed a hero and admired for standing his ground and fighting against crime. As Billy's about to be escorted out, the Duke brothers, who have overheard the chaos, rush to the scene to find out what's going on and are surprised to hear Louis's explanation about Billy trying to steal the payroll checks.
State prisons and all that?
You ain't talking to this guy. I want a lawyer.
Wanting nothing to do with the situation, all the lawyers remain quiet, avert eye contact, and Billy is escorted out after Louis announces that he will press charges for the attempted robbery. Meanwhile, Randolph stands back, reflecting on everything, and remarks that Billy is a product of unfortunate life circumstances and shares his view that if he were given the same advantages in life as Louis was, he would have achieved great things in his life and even led their company way better than Louis. Outraged by this, Mortimer argues that Billy had probably been born a thief and a troublemaker and had been causing problems all his life. After arguing for a few minutes, the brothers decide that they should set up a scientific experiment meant to forever settle the nature versus nurture argument and convince themselves they are doing it for the greater good of humanity. They then choose the obvious candidates, Louis and Billy, and try to work out a way to give each man the life of the other so that they can observe the outcome. To make matters more interesting for them, the brothers make a bet, backing each of their opposing views on the nature versus nurture argument, and prepare to get to work. This can't end well. Elsewhere that evening, Louis returns to his house, where he has invited Penelope to have dinner with him. While Coleman cooks them some desserts tableside, Penelope hails her fiancé's bravery and admires him for standing against crime. Later that night, as Coleman finishes up for the night, he receives a call from the Dukes.
A scientific experiment. Well, not at all. Well, it's your house, sir, and I work for you.
Meanwhile, upstairs, totally oblivious to the ominous schemes being concocted behind his back, Louis celebrates his feat with Penelope, spends blissful time with her, discusses their wedding plans, and promises to give her a great life. Elsewhere, in jail, Billy spends the night getting to know his cellmates, telling them fantastical stories of his arrest, painting himself to be a wealthy undercover agent, and impressing them. The next morning, to his delight, Billy is informed that his bail has been posted and he is released from jail. A relieved Billy walks outside and, grateful for his freedom, starts to walk away until he sees Randolph and Mortimer, who call him over from their car. Recognizing them from the private club, Billy is suspicious of the duo and, fearing that they are trying to frame him for another crime, tries to flee until they inform him that they are the ones who posted his bail and plead with him to join them in the car. Reluctantly, Billy gets in the car with the brothers, who offer him some whiskey and cigars, wondering what's going on.
This is a practical joke, right, bro? What about the police and the payroll?
The brothers then assure Billy that all the charges are dropped and he is free to walk away from them, while secretly hoping that they already impressed him with their offer. After considering everything for a few minutes, Billy agrees to take part in their program, and the group drives to Louis's house, where they're politely greeted and welcomed by Coleman.
Billy Ray.
William, this is Coleman. He'll look after your day-to-day needs.
He's your servant. May I take it?
Get out of here, man.
Valentine, very bad.
While Billy washes up, Mortimer reminds Coleman to have Billy's old clothes washed and stored in the closet so that he can use them when he goes back to his old life at the end of the experiment, and orders him to give him a custom-made fancy suit. Later, Billy gets dressed in his suit, joins the men in his living room where they give him a casual tour of the house and tell him that the house and everything in it is now his. Skeptical about the incredible announcement, Billy starts taking some valuables from the room and prepares to walk out from what he believes is a confusing prank. Seeing this, Mortimer runs after him, informs him that he's only stealing from himself, and tries to calm him down.
But the fact remains, all this is yours. You
Like
may
Harlem
do
Globe
it.
tried to shit with it, right? Okay, you want mellow lemon?
You see, Mortimer, William has already made us a profit of $15,000.
Later, with Billy settling into his new life, the Duke brothers proceed with the second phase of their plan. Contact Clarence and ask him to set up Louis. A few hours later, Clarence convinces the Heritage Club hierarchy that one of their members has broken their honorable centuries-old traditions and integrity and stolen some money from fellow members, and calls an emergency meeting promising to identify the culprit.
We marked three $50 bills.
Now, wait a minute. I've never seen this money before.
Outraged by this, Lewis tries to explain that it's a huge misunderstanding and that he has never stolen anything in his life. Oh, how the tables have changed. Lewis is then taken to the police station, where officers bribed by Clarence order him to take off his clothes. Outraged, Lewis tries to once again explain the whole ordeal as a misunderstanding, and when that fails, proceeds to threaten to use his powerful connections to ruin the officers' careers when he gets out. Unfazed by this, the officers force Louis to take off his expensive suit and proceed to book him in jail. Then, the officers start going through his personal belongings and take note of them, while judging him for his gold credit cards and expensive wallet, until they find a stash of drugs planted by Clarence. Appearing shocked, the officer informs Louis, who's outraged out of his mind, that he will do a minimum of 5 years for possession, and officially charges him. Elsewhere, Billy, who's excited by his new life, puts on his expensive suit and coat and goes out to his usual bar, where the owner refuses to serve him and scolds him for not paying his $20 debt. Appearing offended as if he no longer recognizes the version of himself that didn't have $20, Billy throws dollar bills at the owner without even counting them and orders a round of champagne for everyone. Excited by this gesture, everyone surrounds Billy, fascinated by the man they see in front of them, thanking him for his kindness and starting to party with him. After having fun for a couple of hours, Billy invites everyone to come back home with him so that they can continue the party there and drives them there. There, Billy starts partying with the group until the party gets out of hand, which annoys him.
Hey, what is this? What is this shit here? Hold up! Hey! Hold it, Hey, yo, cuz, you gonna vomit the bathroom downstairs.
Well, this is fascinating. Billy then informs Coleman, who's professionally serving some food to the rowdy guests, to stop offering food and throws everyone out. As the group makes its way out, Billy reminds them that his neighbors are working people and warns them to leave quietly. Meanwhile, at the police station, Penelope posts Louis' bail, waits a couple of hours for him to be released, and is shocked to see him disgruntled and with a black eye.
Really, it's the truth.
You look awful. Shoes and you've been fighting it. And you
Stole my clothes. Those men wanted to have sex with me.
discussed this somewhere else, Louis.
As the couple waits outside, Penelope shares that she's there against all her family's advice and informs Louis that he's been fired from his job and is being sued for embezzlement. Louis passionately explains that he has never done drugs or sold any in all of his life. Touched by the genuine words, Penelope tries to give Louis the benefit of the doubt and proceeds to forgive him. However, before the couple make up, a prostitute named Ophelia, who's been paid by Clarence, appears out of nowhere, kisses Louis, and asks him to give her some drugs, hinting that she's his regular customer. Furious by this, Penelope quickly changes her mind, breaks off her engagement, announces that she never wants to see Louis again, and leaves. Perplexed by everything, Louis lashes out at Ophelia, who's seemingly shocked by the consequences, and tries to explain quickly how she got involved. Dismissing this, Louis asks Ophelia to lend him some money so that they can take a cab to his house, where he promises his butler will repay her generously and drive her anywhere she wants to go. Amused by the whole unlikely situation, Ophelia agrees to the deal, and the duo gets a cab to Louis' townhouse. On the way, hoping to prove his identity to Ophelia, Louis shows her all of his gold credit cards and explains that he can charge them anywhere in the world. However, still skeptical, Ophelia explains that she only takes cash and sticks to their original arrangement. The duo gets to the house, and Louis tries to open the door but is dismayed to realize that his keys no longer work and proceeds to knock on the door.
Yes.
Oh, Coleman, could you please let me in? I'm having trouble with my key.
Why? If you don't go away, I shall be forced to call the police.
Frustrated, Louis then takes Ophelia to his bank, promising to withdraw some cash from his account and pay her. However, there, Louis is informed that the IRS has frozen all his accounts. Before Louis can process this, the bank manager adds that even though they have known him for years, they don't want to do business with drug dealers, and repossesses all of his credit cards, and being thrown out by the security guards.
Why is someone deliberately
I
trying...
have been framed! You can't just leave me here!
Got enough?
I'm gonna regret this, bud.
Then, a few minutes later, in a bizarre coincidence, while being driven to the firm, Billy spots a ranting and disgruntled Louis in a cab, remembers him as the man who had gotten him arrested, wonders what happened to him, and asks Coleman if he knows him. Terrified by this question and determined not to give anything away, Coleman denies knowing anything and proceeds to drive away, while Louis suddenly notices Coleman driving Billy in his car and screams for an explanation. A few minutes later, Billy and Coleman reach the firm, and a confused Billy, who's quite spooked by what he noticed, steps out of the car.
You don't want to be late, Fred.
Man, what am I supposed to do in here? What they want from me? I can't do it.
Just be yourself, sir. Whatever happens, they...
Yeah, seems like that's the only thing they can't take. Taking this advice to heart, Billy puts on a brave face and gets inside the building, where he's quickly directed to the brothers' office. There, the Duke brothers welcome their new managing director and explain everything to him.
What it is we do here.
We are commodities.
This is not...
Commodities. Commodities are agricultural products, like coffee.
Elsewhere, Louis and Ophelia buy some groceries and head to her apartment in a neighborhood which Louis never even knew existed. Once there, Louis rants about all the inexplicable and unfair things that have happened to him over the last few hours, and after putting everything he knows together, correctly guesses that Billy, the man who tried to rob the payrolls, has replaced him at his job and taken over his life. Having had enough, Ophelia stops his endless complaining and advises him to deal with his new reality. She then shares her wish to retire from her brutal profession in a couple of years, and hence asks Louis to give her a hefty sum of money once he gets back on his feet and reclaims his life in exchange for all she's doing for him now, and he agrees. Meanwhile, at the firm, with Louis now gone, Mortimer and Randolph carefully follow the stock market prices, panic as the pork belly price drops, and proceed to buy a hefty amount until Billy stops them.
Tell me just why you think the price of pork belly.
Now, Randolph.
Right, but if you want to lose money, go ahead.
What are you
All
trying-
morning. Which means everybody's sitting in their office and they're waiting for them to hit rock bottom. We're losing all our damn money, and Christmas is around the corner, and I ain't gonna have no money to buy my son the G.I. Joe with the panicking. Look at him.
He's right, Mortimer.
That's quite brave, Billy. Having total confidence in their new hire, Randolph does as Billy advises, which earns them an impressive profit. Billy congratulates him on a job well done and encourages him to keep up his good work, while an annoyed Mortimer rushes him to leave. Moments after the brothers leave, as Billy walks around the office, he finds a wad of cash on the floor. Delighted by the valuable find, Billy picks up the cash and proceeds to pocket it until he suddenly realizes that it may be part of a test to see his trustworthiness. Hence, Billy runs as fast as he can to catch up with the brothers, and to the frustration of Mortimer, who had secretly set up the test, and to the delight of Randolph, gives it back to them. Elsewhere, Louis thinks long and hard about his circumstances and decides to fight for his old life back. Hence, he opts to represent himself in court against the drug and embezzlement charges, and goes to the Heritage Club to talk to Todd and his friends, and finds them hanging out with Penelope and her group. Despite correctly surmising that Todd has started seeing Penelope, Louis remains calm and asks the group to give a positive character testimony on his behalf to the court. Before they can give their response, Louis also asks Penelope and her friends to lend him money and promises to return it once he wins his case and gets his life back. Unfortunately, to Louis's utter disappointment, Todd speaks up on behalf of everyone and scolds Louis for appearing at the club after everything he's done and for inconveniencing them, while Penelope remarks that no one is interested in buying drugs and, seemingly embarrassed to even be seen talking to him, asks him to leave. Utterly heartbroken, Louis leaves and walks around in the rain for hours, desperately trying to clear his head, but instead becomes furious when he sees the Dukes and Billy at a party, in which Billy gives out some trading advice to the most influential people and impresses everyone. Now, more certain than ever that everything that has happened to him had been part of a carefully laid out plan, Louis blames Billy for everything and vows to make him pay. Then, desperate for money, Louis stops by a pawn shop where he's forced to sell his vintage, one-of-a-kind, expensive watch for $50, with which he buys a gun. However, a couple of hours later, Louis falls ill and is forced to stay in bed for a few days, while Ophelia kindly takes care of him. However, the next day, to make matters worse for Louis, a newspaper article that praises the new managing director at the firm breaks out, which infuriates him and sparks his need for vengeance. A few days later, on Christmas Eve, while everyone attends the yearly Christmas party at the firm, Billy works late in his office, carefully going through the payroll sees a hefty payment written out to Clarence, whose name he couldn't find anywhere else in the files, and becomes concerned. Hence, hoping to clear up the matter, Billy goes downstairs, joins the Dukes at the party, and asks them about it. However, just like they had done to Louis, the Dukes managed to distract Billy long enough to change the topic, take the check, and invite him to enjoy the party. Meanwhile, hoping to settle the score once and for all, Louis, who has recovered well from his illness, goes to the firm's office party dressed as Santa Claus. Then, before he gets to his plan of vengeance, he starts to pack as much food as he can into his pockets and stuffs his costume to capacity. He then heads to Billy's office, where he tries to plant some drugs in Billy's drawers and frame the man who he believes has single-handedly ruined his life, but is soon caught by Billy. Confused by what he sees, Billy demands to know Louis's identity and what he's doing there. But soon, Louis starts calling out for the Dukes, who soon rush over to the office and are shocked to their core by what they see.
I'm making a citizen's arrest. This man, marijuana joints, pills, Quaalude, Valium, yellow ones, red ones, dealer. Look here in his office drawer. He's got all... Not me.
Really, I just came in and caught this man planting. Hello, security. Merry Christmas.
Luckily, the security guards soon arrive and escort Louis out, who goes downstairs with the gun still in hand and terrorizes his old colleagues before he starts wallowing in hopelessness, leaves, and starts drinking heavily from a bottle he stole. Meanwhile, in the office, to the delight of Randolph, Billy surprises the brothers by announcing that crime should not be tolerated, adds that no amount of desperation or poverty should be used as an excuse to commit such heinous acts against society, and reiterates that justice must prevail above all else. Then, overwhelmed by everything and feeling quite uneasy, Billy heads to the bathroom to discreetly smoke some cigarettes, and soon the Dukes arrive, and, believing they are all alone, start discussing their wager.
Now, what are we going to do about taking Winthrop back and returning Valentine?
Do you really believe I would have a nigger run home?
Would I? I do think we should hold off.
Shocked to his core by the truth and seeing things clearly for the first time, Billy, who now understands the extent of the experiment, decides to talk to Louis about his discovery and runs out after him, but fails to catch up with him. Meanwhile, Louis heads out to the rainy streets and, now feeling completely hopeless and trapped in his new circumstance, tries to shoot and kill himself, but fails to do so. He then realizes that he couldn't afford to buy bullets, and hence, the gun is empty. Once again, frustrated by what he considers a shortcoming, with Billy following him, Louis goes back to Ophelia's apartment, where he locks himself in the bathroom and tries to overdose on some medication. Luckily, soon Billy arrives there asking for Louis, which shocks Ophelia and prompts him to inform Louis of the situation over the locked doors. Billy and Ophelia then break down the bathroom door and rescue Louis just in time. Sympathizing with Louis, who has been used as a pawn by the Dukes, Billy quickly takes him and Ophelia to the townhouse, where Coleman calls for a doctor, who promptly arrives and treats Louis. A couple of hours later, Louis slowly regains his consciousness and is delighted to find himself in his own bed, with Coleman standing beside him.
Coleman, I've had the most absurd nightmare. I was hated me. It was all because of this terror.
Oh, if only that were true, Louis. Suddenly, seeing Billy, a furious Louis lunges at him and chokes him, while listing everything he has done to him, until Billy assures him that he had nothing to do with any of it, and announces that the Dukes had been behind everything all along. Furious to learn that the Dukes had used him as a pawn and ruined his life over a $1 bet, which Coleman regretfully confirms, Louis lets go of Billy, turns his attention to the Dukes, and tries to come up with a way to get his revenge. Later, Louis runs out of ideas, decides to confront the brothers with everything he has discovered, and cleans and loads the vintage weapons in his house to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Alarmed by this, Ophelia, Billy, and Coleman try to convince him to devise a different plan to no avail. Then, suddenly, as if timed perfectly, a news broadcast comes on TV, and the group learns that the new crop reports will be delivered from Miami to the Ministry of Agriculture in Washington, D.C., with a heavily armed security team led by Clarence Beeks in 2 days. Then, as both Billy and Louis recognize the name and connect everything, Ophelia sees Clarence on TV and identifies him as the man who had paid her to mess with Louis. Billy and Louis then put everything together and realize that the Dukes are planning to get their hands on the report before it becomes public so that they can corner the entire concentrated orange juice market. As the trio tries to figure out how to get the best revenge against the Dukes, Coleman, who seemingly has had enough of the brothers' manipulative ways, advises them to beat the Dukes at their own game, and the group comes up with a plan. The next day at the firm, Billy discreetly listens in on a phone conversation between the Dukes and Clarence.
Can we expect delivery?
I will be leaving D.C.
I like that. Very good.
The final payment is due on delivery.
Then, Clarence steals the reports and gets on a train to head to the meeting place. But soon, Billy, who poses as a foreign exchange student, Coleman, who dresses up as a priest, Ophelia, who dresses up as a tourist, and Louis, who disguises himself quite well, join him in his compartment, distract him, steal the report, and replace it with a fake one. Unfortunately, just as they finish this, Clarine recognizes the group, becomes furious, holds them at gunpoint, and escorts them out to the rear of the train.
The party's over.
Party's over? Hey, it's almost New Year's Eve!
Seeing him as a threat, the gorilla then hits and knocks Clarence out. Relieved for the respite, the group then neutralizes him, tapes his mouth shut and his hands together, puts him in the gorilla costume, and throws him in the cage with the real animal, who is seemingly excited to find a friend. Billy then goes to the meeting place, where he remains in the dark, poses as Clarence, gives the Dukes the fake report, and receives a suitcase full of cash as payment. Having completed this plan, Louis and Billy prepare to head off to New York and are escorted by Coleman and Ophelia, who give them all their life savings to use in the next phase of their plan. Then, as they bid each other farewell, Ophelia and Louis kiss, start a relationship, and promise to see one another soon before Billy and Louis walk away. Louis and Billy reach New York before the market opens and prepare for the final part of their plan.
Think positive. Never show any sign of weakness. Nothing you have ever experienced can prepare you for the unbridled.
Meanwhile, the Dukes also arrive, and following the information on the forged report, order their trader Wilson to buy as much concentrated orange juice stock as possible, despite the high price. Confused by this, Wilson tries to advise the brothers to patiently wait until the crop report is released in an hour before committing themselves to such decisions, but fails to convince them. Soon, the market opens, and as the Dukes proudly watch on from a distance, Wilson gets to work.
102 bid for 100.
Hey, the Dukes are trying to corner the market.
All of a sudden, the brothers notice the price of the concentrated orange juice falling, become concerned, and try to find out what's going on to no avail. Moments later, after seeing Billy and Louis making moves among the traders, the brothers realize that they may have been misled by wrong reports and start running as fast as they can to reach Wilson and tell him to sell what he bought before it's too late. However, the brothers have a hard time finding their trader amidst the chaos, and soon the Ministry of Agriculture comes on TV to announce the latest crop reports. The floor goes completely quiet, and everyone waits to hear the report with anticipation. To the Duke's utter shock, and to the delight of Billy and Louis, it's revealed that orange production has not been affected by the recent cold weather, and hence orange juice prices are predicted to fall. As the stock prices start dropping dramatically, the traders, including Wilson, frantically try to sell all they can, but soon the pressure gets to him, and Wilson hyperventilates and passes out. Seeing this, the Dukes try to take matters into their own hands and try to sell themselves, until the market closes a few minutes later, which devastates them. Meanwhile, Louis and Billy, who have been calmly buying the stocks at the significantly lower prices, calculate their hefty profits, congratulate one another on their unprecedented success, and celebrate their feat.
How'd you make out today?
How could you do this to us after everything?
Hey, Louis a bet here. Louis bet me that we couldn't both get rich and put you all in the poorhouse at the same time.
To make matters worse for the brothers, they are soon asked to fulfill their margin call, and when they fail to come up with the $394 million, the exchange manager, who was once their friend, orders their seats to be sold. Before Randolph and Mortimer can even process this, the manager adds that both their personal and firm assets will be confiscated, which will essentially bankrupt them. As the implication of what has just transpired settles in for Randolph, he starts having difficulty breathing, grabs his chest, and falls down to the ground. While the manager and the rest attempt to call an ambulance, Mortimer, who is seemingly unfazed by this, protests to sell their seats and vainly demands that the market reopen so that he can salvage their legacy. Later, an ambulance arrives, and as they take Randolph to the hospital, Mortimer follows after his brother, blaming him for obsessing over the nature versus nurture concept and starting an experiment that ruined their lives and their legacy. Elsewhere, still in the cage with the gorilla, Clarence is loaded onto a ship heading to Africa, where an elaborate scientific experiment has been set up. Meanwhile, now filthy rich, Louis, Ophelia, Coleman, Billy, and their new butler Dimitri head off to a gorgeous tropical beach where they have the time of their life.